Hey guys, it's Ted McGrath. So welcome to today's show. I want to jump in with a quick report on MicroStrategy's Bitcoin gains this year so far compared to Michael Saylor's prediction for 2025. Good news is MicroStrategy is ahead of the game in terms of their Bitcoin gains. So I want to show you the report on that, number one. Number two, I want to show you a table in terms of dollar cost averaging and what it would look like if one had put their money in Bitcoin over the last 4 years comparatively to other stocks and other choices. So we're going to take a look at that chart here in just a second. All right. So I'm going to pull it up and just give you the latest and the greatest news. Remember, this is not financial advice. This is not tax advice. This is not legal advice. So this is for informational and educational purposes only. Okay. So I'm going to give you some of the news right now. We can jump right in and take a look and see what's happening with MicroStrategy and what this actually means. All right. So when you look at here at this headline, it says MicroStrategy shareholders see $1.8 billion gain as strategy Treasury grows Bitcoin reserves. If you watched my video the other day, I was talking about Michael Saylor's predictions in the new year that MicroStrategy would have a $10 billion gain. So as of today, February 10th, there's a $1.8 billion gain for the shareholders. So clearly, he's way ahead of his timelines. If we just keep pace the way MicroStrategy, or I should say strategy, is pacing right now, by the end of the year, we'd be approximately around $20 billion gain, which would be 2x the prediction that strategy is making. So that is good news. Obviously, the markets aren't looking good. They're chopping, and there's all kinds of speculation of why that's happening today. You know, we could speculate all day long, but let's look at where the company's going, okay? So you see here, February 11th post on social media, X platform. The company obviously rebranded their strategy, but here's what Saylor says so far. So far this year, strategy Treasury operations has resulted in a Bitcoin gain of 18,527 Bitcoin, which equates to a Bitcoin gain of $1.8 billion. If you can't see it, I will zoom in for you here so you can see it on the screen. That is what I'm talking about right here. So $1.8 billion for the MicroStrategy shareholders, which is good. We also know that MicroStrategy has tapped about 21 billion of their $42 billion Bitcoin acquisition plan that they announced back in October of 2024. So they're halfway there to their goal. It was originally a 3-year plan. And within 4 or 5 months, they're already halfway towards their goal. So they continue to buy. We know Saylor hit the ATM again on over the weekend and added more MicroStrategy to their bag. If you look at their holdings right now, their Bitcoin holdings have reached 478,740 Bitcoin. Their total net asset value is $46.7 billion. And you look at their yield on their Bitcoin is 74.3%. So the yield is basically in relation to Saylor's goal to get more Bitcoin per share for his shareholders, which they continue to do. They had a big 74.3% yield in 2024. But this also reinforces here, as it says, the largest publicly traded corporate holder of Bitcoin is MicroStrategy. There's no denying that. So we got that going, which is nice. Again, the purchase that was just made on February 10th was MicroStrategy bought 7,633 Bitcoin for about $742 million at $97,000 per Bitcoin. Okay. So, and they have achieved a Bitcoin yield of 4.1% year to date in 2025. So if you round that out and say it's about 4% in the first month, that means by the end of the year, the Bitcoin yield could be around 40% or 48% compared to last year of 74%. Who knows what's going to happen over the next 10, 11 months, how much more Bitcoin that MicroStrategy is going to acquire. We know this year they're going to use convertible notes because they still have like $17 billion worth of convertible notes to acquire more Bitcoin. So we know that they're going to use that this year in 2025 and probably tap the rest of the ATM for the 21 billion that they plan for the ATM in terms of issuing more shares to buy Bitcoin. So they'll probably tap that rest of the 21 billion for sure this year as well, buying more Bitcoin. So this is all really good in terms of the plan that MicroStrategy is sticking to. Obviously, nobody wants to see the price right now. Bitcoin's at what, $95,000 right now. Pre-market, if we look at MicroStrategy, let's take a look at where they're at right now. It's probably lower than what it closed, is my guess. 319. So closed around 319 today. It's sitting around 319 as well. Okay. Here's what their chief financial officer says. He says the fourth quarter of 2024 marked our largest ever increase in quarterly Bitcoin holdings, culminating in the acquisition of 218,000 Bitcoin. That's a hell of a lot of Bitcoin, right? Acquired for $20.5 billion since the end of Q3. Wow. Okay. We all know that the at-the-market equity offering, they issue shares, they buy Bitcoin. That's what that is. Convertible notes, they borrow money, they buy Bitcoin. That's what fuels their strategy. And here's what this article is saying. That Saylor has projected that Bitcoin could reach $13 million per coin by 2045 in his base case scenario. Bearish case would be $3 million by 2045. Bullish case would be $49 million by 2045. So there's a huge, obvious disparity in those projections. But the cool thing is that if you do the math and you take a look at projecting that out from today's price at $95,000 and you project that out to 2045, you would see that Bitcoin by 2045 would have to do about 28% per year to get to 13 million a coin. All right. So if Bitcoin does 13% a year, or excuse me, 28% a year for the next 20 years, and we hit 2045, we will hit 13 million per coin. That's the simple math. If Bitcoin does about 17% per year for the next 20 years, we will hit $3 million per coin. So you can see the difference between 17% and the difference between 28% return. It's the difference between a $3 million coin in 20 years and a $13 million coin. If you want to look at, performance of what's like the baseline of comparing Bitcoin to and its returns, the S&P 500 did 14% over the last 30 years or so, is the average of the S&P. So it may be even a little bit less, but certainly over the last 4 years, it's been a 14% return. So Bitcoin would have to do only 17% over every year over the next 20 years to get to 3 million a coin. So to think that Bitcoin one day won't go to 3 million a coin, I think is kind of ridiculous. I think that it won't, considering there's only 1 million Bitcoin left, because there's 20 million Bitcoin in circulation right now. So there's only 1 million approximately left. So we know we're in a supply crunch to a certain degree. And by the time we hit 2034, I believe it is, 99% of all the Bitcoin will have been issued. So another 10 years and 99% of all the Bitcoin will have been issued. So the game is pretty much the next 10 years, it's gobbled up, all the Bitcoin. So that's what we're looking at. Now, if you look at, right now, I to answer some questions of the MicroStrategy pump, when will that happen? I mean, heck, I told you guys in earlier videos, I'm waiting for money to come in. I can't wait for it to come in. It's supposed to be here any day now this week. When it comes in, I wish I was buying at these prices. So for me, I'm happy that it's chopping sideways right now because I want to buy in. And I would love to buy MicroStrategy at the $319 price point. Even if MicroStrategy dropped below 300 or lower, I believe it's going to go higher this year. So I'd love to buy it at a $319 price point. So hopefully my money will come in from my trust this week and I can buy more. Okay. So that's my basic plan. Yeah, well, that's right, James. There's 5 million that have been lost on wallets, like completely. People have lost their Bitcoin. So there's 15 million in circulation. That's absolutely right. But there's only about 1 million more Bitcoin that's going to be issued, that will be out in circulation beyond what's already there in the in the next 10 years. Pretty much all the Bitcoin will be issued. So I know it goes out to a ridiculous number in the future of when the Bitcoin halvings will continue to happen, and by the year 2140 something or whatever it is, all the Bitcoin will be issued. But pretty much by 2034, 99% of the supply will have been issued. So that's great for us from the standpoint of driving up the demand. The demand's already high, but the supply going down and the demand's super high right now. We got about 22 states right now that have applied for strategic Bitcoin reserves. So we have more and more states coming in every single day, which is cool. And then I want to show you a calculator right now, which I thought is pretty fun. So let's take a look at this, which if you were to invest in Bitcoin over the last 4 years or 3 years or 2 years, if you were to invest in gold, if you're investing into Apple stock, or if you're to invest into Dow Jones, a comparison of what Bitcoin would have done. So for me, looking at this, if I were to dollar cost average and buy Bitcoin or even MicroStrategy over the next 4 years, because a lot of times people ask the question, hey, what happens if I get in now and I start buying now? The question people always have, is it worth it? Am I too late? Am I too late to the game? Now, I just gave you projections that if Bitcoin does 17% a year for the next 20 years, you're going to have a $3 million Bitcoin. If it does 28%, you're going to have a $13 million Bitcoin. So if you believe that Bitcoin is going to outpace the S&P 500 over the next, 20 years, it's probably a better buy than the S&P 500, right? If you believe Bitcoin is going to go up 28% per year in the next 20 years and hit 13 million a coin, which thinking about 13 million a coin is kind of hard for people to wrap their head around, but at 28% a year, that's not hard to wrap your head around at all, considering that would just be twice the S&P 500. And with Bitcoin scarcity and the fact that it is finite, to believe that we would not hit that, I think is kind of silly. I think we will hit that. So if you look at it of like, if I invested money years ago, because I always hear from people, hey, I wish I got in years ago. I heard from a friend like in 2012 and I wish I bought. So you could look at if you had bought 4 years ago, what your returns would be. And the question always is like, okay, should I buy Bitcoin or gold from people who are gold advocates? A lot of times people who are gold advocates are like, no, Bitcoin, gold's the best. But you can compare the assets side by side and actually see what the future could potentially look like by looking at the past. So let me just give you an idea here on this fun chart that we can mess around with. So this chart in particular, you can put in any number that you want, but on the left-hand side, you can put in an amount that you want a dollar cost average per month. Let's say you wanted to put $5,000 a month towards Bitcoin, and you wanted to start that on a monthly basis 4 years ago. So let's say you chose 4 years ago and you invested $5,000 a month into Bitcoin. Well, that investment would be $245,000 invested, you see here. And the value of your Bitcoin would be $685,000 if you had invested in Bitcoin 4 years ago and dollar cost averaged every single month. And you see the percent change is that your Bitcoin would be 179% if you had done the same investment in gold as you see here and done the same $5,000 a month every month for the last 4 years. Your gold would be $245,000 invested as well, same as Bitcoin here. But your value of gold would be $350,000. And your percent change would be 43%. Okay. So now if you look at Apple, same thing, $245,000 invested because you're investing in dollar cost averaging $5,000 every month. And had you done this 4 years ago, your Apple stock would be $355,000. So Apple would have barely beaten gold at a 44% return for Apple over here. And then if you did the Dow Jones, which is like, some of the top 30 companies out there, like the Boeings and the Coca-Colas of the world, and 30 companies bundled up, and you invested in the Dow Jones, the DJI, then, and you put 245,000 in as well, you'd have 311,000 at a 27% return. So pretty interesting. Bitcoin obviously crushes all of them, and you can play with time horizons. Let's play 3-year time horizon. 3 years ago, had you done it, look at the returns. Bitcoin still crushes at 199%, and it crushes gold, which is at 38%. You could go back and look, let's go 5 years ago and look at this. And Bitcoin is at 309%. So if you just dollar cost average into Bitcoin 5 years ago, and you would have put 305,000 Bitcoin and you'd have 1,247,000, a 309% return compared to gold, which is a 46% return, compared to Apple, which is a 69% return. So Bitcoin blows away gold. It blows away Apple. It blows away the Dow Jones. Now, if you put MicroStrategy into this calculator, which I don't have it in this table, but if you put MicroStrategy, I mean, you could imagine what your MicroStrategy would be. It would be ridiculous, right? I mean, it would be way more than Bitcoin. So now if you just took these numbers and you're like, okay, if I were to deploy the same strategy and look at when do I put money into MicroStrategy or when do I put money into Bitcoin? And you're like, I'm at the top. Should I invest now? Am I too late? Well, people thought this 4 years ago. And if they had done it 4 years ago, they'd have 179% return on Bitcoin. If they'd done it 3 years ago, they'd have 199% return on Bitcoin, right? So that's waiting even longer. If you'd done it 2 years ago, you'd have 144% return on Bitcoin. So, and if you'd done it 1 year ago, you'd have a 51% return on Bitcoin. Make sense? So, and this is dollar cost averaging it, right? So you look at Bitcoin and it's like gold did 16% over that time frame, Apple 15% over the last year, Dow Jones, like it's not even a comparison, right? So you start to put MicroStrategy into that table, and let's assume that MicroStrategy does a 2x of what Bitcoin does this year, or even a 1.75x. And if you look at the past on these tables that I'm showing you, and you're like, hey, I'm considering dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin or MicroStrategy over the next 4 years, well, you can just look at what I was showing in the last 4 years, right? And I'll go over to that table again and just show you 4 years ago. Let's just look at a 4-year time horizon. Because if you assume and you're looking at the bull run over 3 or 4 year time horizons, depending on when you enter, right? And you're looking at a 3 or 4 year time horizons, this is 4 years ago. If you started, your Bitcoin would be 179%. Let's just say it's 3 years. Okay, 199%. So if you're considering it now and it's 2025, and we're like, okay, the next bull run is going to begin sometime in 2028, right? So then you're looking like a 3-year time horizon or so. And you're looking, if you'd done it 3 years ago, Bitcoin would be 199% rate of return. Now, I'm not saying that Bitcoin is going to do that over the next 3 years, although it's highly possible that it will. Look at it if you just did that with MicroStrategy and you just started dollar cost averaging today. So that's one way to look at it, as like, okay, I could time the top. I could decide when I'm going to put my money in. I could decide I'm going to invest now and I'm going to get out when we hit the top with MicroStrategy or we hit the top with Bitcoin. Or I could just be like, hey, I'm going to dollar cost average every single month. I'm going to keep buying and buying and buying no matter what happens. And I'm on a 4-year plan. And you could do that. And if you're on a 4-year plan in Bitcoin or a 3-year plan like this, that's 199% if you started 3 years ago. So what could happen 3 years from today? Pending, we have institutional adoption that we know is continuing to increase rapidly. We have, the Bitcoin standard being, put in place by companies that are adding more and more to their treasuries. We have more and more companies that are adding Bitcoin to their treasuries. We have 22 states now applying for strategic Bitcoin reserves. And we have, the news on BlackRock just upped their stake in MicroStrategy from 4.09% to 5%. And so now they own 5% of MicroStrategy. So obviously they're betting on that stock. So you have a lot of indicators for the long term that are just looking like, wow, this is a great asset to put money into, MicroStrategy and Bitcoin, over a 4-year period. And this dollar cost average strategy is a great one. So not financial advice, not telling you what to do. I'm just saying it's another viewpoint to look at, right? Some of us put our money into Bitcoin years ago, and some of us are looking now of like, what do I do with money? Is it too late? And so this is more for people that are looking and thinking, is it too late for me to actually invest my money into Bitcoin or MicroStrategy? Or is it too late to look at this from an educational standpoint? Because that's all we're doing here, because it's not financial advice. But you can look at it any which way. It's $5,000 a month, even if you did $1,000 a month, right? On a monthly basis. And you start investing 3 years ago, right? Your Bitcoin value would be $110,000. Your gold value would be 51. It's not even in the same ballpark, you see? So Bitcoin is obviously the superior asset. Then you put in MicroStrategy and you add a 2x, right? MicroStrategy is probably sitting, its MNAV right now, is probably trading there. I haven't looked recently, but it's around a 1.7 something right now. So even if MicroStrategy does a 1.7 that of Bitcoin, you can imagine what that value would be over 3 to 4 years. Instead of 110,000 dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin in MicroStrategy, you'd have something more like 200,000 bucks. Because I know for me, when I look at my MicroStrategy portfolio last year, it's up way over a double than what Bitcoin was. And so because of, we obviously know that MicroStrategy is trading at a premium. And then they take those excess dollars that we pay a premium for when we buy their stock and they invest it in Bitcoin. So the fact that they're trading at a premium is a really good thing. People are willing to buy it at a premium. And so the returns that people are getting on MicroStrategy are higher than Bitcoin. And I think that's going to continue into the future, which also makes it a much more volatile asset. You could look at it as a much more risky asset, but it makes it a more volatile asset for sure. So if you're not looking at things over a 4-year time frame, or if I'm not looking at them over a 4-year time frame, and we're not looking at this chart that says dollar cost average into it, and this is what you would compare or stack up to with Bitcoin, gold, Apple, and the Dow Jones, and the Bitcoin dusts it over a 3-year period. So if you think the same thing's going to continue going into the future, that means that Bitcoin would crush gold going into the future, would crush Apple, and it would crush the Dow Jones, and would pretty much crush everything else that's out there. And we know that nothing else has even come close to Bitcoin except NVIDIA. Okay, and nothing came close to MicroStrategy. If you look at the returns of MicroStrategy, I was looking at it over a time period recently, and you compared MicroStrategy and NVIDIA and Bitcoin over the time period I was looking at. MicroStrategy was like 2,400%. Bitcoin was somewhere around. I think NVIDIA was around 970%, and Bitcoin was below that by a little bit. So NVIDIA did beat Bitcoin over a certain time period, but it's the only one that did, only stock. So to think that other stocks will beat Bitcoin that are mainstream stocks over the next 3 to 4 years, I doubt it. And Bitcoin will certainly be in the top in terms of investments that I would choose to make, which is why I'm also putting some new money into Bitcoin this week. And MicroStrategy certainly, I think, is going to dust them all over the next 3 to 4 years. So this is a cool chart. It's a nice indicator to look at. What time horizon do you want to look? Do you want to look at over 5 years? What did Bitcoin do? If you started dollar cost averaging 5 years ago, you'd have a 309% return on Bitcoin. So any time frame you pick, let's look at it 7 years ago and compare. If I started dollar cost averaging $1,000 a month into Bitcoin 7 years ago, Bitcoin would have done 635% over that time frame of 7 years. Gold would have done 65%. Apple would have done 163%. So when you stack up Bitcoin and gold, it's laughable. It's laughable. Like it's not even like we call it digital gold, but it's not even that. It's just a metaphor because it blows in every way possible. It blows gold out of the freaking stratosphere. Not even in the same ballpark, as far as I'm concerned. So that's the game. It's kind of fun, and you look at these numbers, and it's fun to play with the numbers because ultimately, I'm invested in looking at what are my numbers, when am I going to take profits, when am I going to sell, all that good stuff, right? Chad says I'm opening a HELOC to buy MicroStrategy at these prices. I love your enthusiasm. I'm not recommending anything on financial advice, but I'm aping in this week too. As soon as my dough comes in, I'm buying in. So I'm excited, and I'm still excited for 2025. Like my feelings haven't changed. Could we go lower? Yeah, we could go lower. Could we drop lower? There is some talk that prices are being suppressed, prices are being kept down, that the larger institutional investors and larger players are trying to shake out the retail investors. I don't know whether that's true or not. Could be. But at some point, we're going to make a move here, and I'd be happy buying MicroStrategy at 319 today. And I'm going to make a significant buy coming up this week if my money comes in this week. If not, latest it'll be next week. So I'm super excited about it. Super excited about the future. very excited. Even if you watch, I watched a video on YouTube today with Trump and Elon was at the desk with his kid, and they were talking about D.O.G.E, the Department of Government Efficiency, and the number of inefficiencies that they found in the budget for the United States. Whatever you think of Elon, whatever you think of Trump, I don't care. I love them both. I think they're amazing. Whatever your opinion is on them, fine. But their plan of what they're doing to eliminate certain things in the budget to create a sane budget was a worthwhile video to watch. And I really love how they're looking to eliminate $1 trillion. And looking at the viewpoint of what Elon was saying in his talk was like, if we were able to eliminate $1 trillion and then even produce $1 trillion in this economy, then we would essentially like not have inflation for the year, right? Because we're eliminating $1 trillion from the actual from that we're spending on just things that we shouldn't be spending money on, according to their viewpoint and what they want to cut out. So wouldn't that be amazing if like the US could decrease its debt? And he goes into explain it more. Go search the video. It's Elon and Trump sitting at his desk and Elon standing next to him, and Elon's kids there. And they're talking about the budget, and they're talking about all the things that the prior administration had spent money on, or whoever put those laws into place, and just some crazy things that were antiquated that they thought they could cut out. And I thought it was really interesting to see the viewpoint, which related to if we cut down the American debt and we cut down $1 trillion of debt, what that could potentially do for interest rates for homeowners, what that could potentially do for food prices, what that could potentially do for interest rates on cars and things of that nature. So I thought it was a fascinating video. Go watch it just for the pure sake of the financial implications of it. I thought it was pretty damn cool. So anyway, I hope this serves you. I think this could be a fun year for us in 2025. And, I always like to look at these scenarios like I just mapped out. If you're just joining us, I was just looking at if you just dollar cost average into Bitcoin or MicroStrategy, and I was looking at the last 3 years. If you just dollar cost average, what your returns would be on Bitcoin, and over a 3-year period, it would have been 199%, depending if you started in February of last year, of 3 years ago. And it would have dusted Bitcoin, it would have dusted Apple, and it would have dusted the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So that's pretty cool just to see that and go back and look at the statistics. The stats don't lie. I mean, numbers don't always tell the whole story, but they tell part of the truth for sure. And they're not always an indicator of what's going to happen in the future, but they're a good thing to look at to get certainty on the asset. So I hope this serves you all. I think it's exciting times in 2025. I think there's a lot of change. I think anytime there's a lot of change, there can be confusion that blows off. And because you're actually looking at things, and I think what's happening with the change with the new administration, there's new things being looked at. And when you start to really look, confusion blows off and there's uncertainty that comes with that. And I think what's happening right now in the world is the confusion's blowing off. And there's going to be change and uncertainty. And perhaps the markets are reacting to that as well. And there's change and uncertainty. I don't know what's going to happen in the short term. I don't care to predict what's going to happen in the short term, meaning 2 days, a week, a month. I just think in 2025, I still believe we're going to see a Bitcoin price potentially 150,000 conservatively. 180,000 would be like my bullish case, and my super bullish case would be over 200,000. I still think that we're going to get back to MicroStrategy all-time high of 540 when it was trading after hours. We're at 319 right now. So if I'm going to make a purchase this week in the 300s, I hope it stays at 319 or even goes a little lower. And it goes up to 540. I mean, that's almost an 80% gain. Am I going to be disappointed with that? Maybe it's a 70% gain. No, I still believe MicroStrategy can get to 800. I'm still standing on that as a price prediction. And my bullish case is over $1,000. I think you could hit 1,000. I think it could potentially hit 1,300. And if you look at Bitcoin hitting 200K, look at what would happen to the price point of MicroStrategy. And I do think that MicroStrategy last year was trading at a 2x or a 3x to Bitcoin based on its MNAV, which is its, if you go look up MNAV, look at net asset value. So when you go look at that, there's a a number on that typically oscillates between like 1.7 recently and 2, which means like, you know, if Bitcoin's going to do X, say 100%, then MicroStrategy would probably do 170% based on where the MNAV is right now. We know in 2024 that the MNAV was at 2 and it got as high as over 3%. So I'm saying, like, let's say it doesn't go to 3% like was it at in 2024. Let's say it goes, or sorry, 3x. Let's say it doesn't go to 3x. Let's say it just goes to 2x. Right now it's a 1.7. Let's say it doesn't even go to 2x. Let's say it just goes to 1.7. You can do the math and figure out what would happen. If Bitcoin doubles from here and hits 200,000, what would happen to MicroStrategy? MicroStrategy wouldn't just double. Okay. So you can just do the math on it. It wouldn't just double. It wouldn't go from 320 to 640 if Bitcoin doubles. You know that, right? And I'm not saying it's guaranteed to do more than Bitcoin, but based on what it's been doing and based on the fact that it does trade at a premium and based on the fact that we buy MicroStrategy instead of a Bitcoin ETF because he uses leverage to buy Bitcoin, he issues stock to buy Bitcoin, he issues debt and borrows money to buy Bitcoin. And those two reasons alone that create leverage in the marketplace is what positions them as a leader to acquire more and more Bitcoin. If they weren't doing that, you wouldn't see buys every Monday. So you're seeing those buys. And the fact that he may tap the ATM less in 2025, all the ratios look like it will be less. Meaning instead of issuing stock to buy Bitcoin, it looks like there's going to be a lot more convertible notes. So that could be even better for the MNAV of MicroStrategy. And maybe instead of a 1.7, it gets back over 2x again. And if it's a 2x, that means approximately, and you have to look at the exact numbers on this, and you would have to go through a flow chart and look at every single indicator, every single number. But let's just say Bitcoin doubles. That means MicroStrategy could 3x or 3.5x. 0.5x or 3x from this price point. So let's just say 3x from this price point is over $900 MicroStrategy. So that is a very bullish case, right? Because you have to believe that Bitcoin's going to get to 200K. And also, will Bitcoin stay at 200K? Historically, when it goes up and it hits the top, retail investors take lifestyle chips off the table and they go buy stuff. And so to think if Bitcoin hits 200K or MicroStrategy hits $900 that it's going to stay there, I don't think that's real. Some people think the bull run will go into 2026 and it'll just continue and MicroStrategy is going to continue to buy and the ETFs are going to continue to buy and nation states are going to come and governments are going to come in. And it's just going to be a huge just buying spree of Bitcoin. And that is possible that we have that. And then we just go into 2026 and the price just doesn't oscillate down 80% or 100%, 80% or 70% with Bitcoin, over 100% down with MicroStrategy could happen. Will we have a repeat of 2021 where Bitcoin drops over 70%? I don't think we'll have a drop of 70%, but I don't think it's going to hit 200 if that's its highest point and stay there because people will sell. And retail investors will sell. They'll go sell and buy houses. They'll sell and buy cars. They'll sell and go take vacations. People will sell at 180. People will sell at 150. So the question is, when retail sells, will more institutions come up and gobble it up? Will the ETFs keep buying? Will nation states keep buying? Or eventually nation states get approved to buy? And will they then pick up the slack and continuously buy and gobble up the supply? I don't know. But what I do think is going to happen and what I still maintain to be true for me is that we have a potential to hit a $800, $900, $1,000 MicroStrategy. So, we shall see. And who knows what Bitcoin's going to open up at tomorrow. We're at 95,496 at the time of this video. But anyway, I hope it serves you. It's always fun to talk. And I think also it's good just to communicate in times of uncertainty. And just like I still am strong to my convictions on it, and my convictions could be 100% wrong over in 2025, and we may never see MicroStrategy hit 540 again. I don't think that's the case, and certainly I think in the long term, over this year period, I believe we will break an all-time high in MicroStrategy, and we'll break another all-time high in Bitcoin for sure. That's my belief. So I hope you have a great night. I hope it's been fun, and I hope you're having a great work week. And, we all go through stuff. So at the end of the day, when the markets chop, it sucks. Maybe you had a bad day in business. We had a bad start to the week in our company. And so, one of the things I try to do is get in communication, talk to people, put some confidence, instill some confidence on the airwaves, and stay true to what one believes, because, confidence in the markets and belief in one thing or a thing is ultimately what makes it go to some degree. So you got to have belief and confidence. And the more people that believe in this, the more people that get educated in it, the more people will put their money in it, and the more we could potentially win as a whole. Not financial advice, not investment advice, just a theory. All right. I'll see you on the flip side. Hope you guys stay well. Cheers.